Picture this, a widespread belief that's been fueling frustration and debate across Australia, the idea that we're shelling out for more for electricity than folks in other nations, all because we've supposedly wasted our once cheap energy edge. But what if I told you this narrative might be more fiction than fact? Buckle up, because we're about to dive into the data and debunk some myths that could change how you view your power bill forever. It's a common grievance: Australians are coughing up way more for electricity than we used to, and we were once the envy of the world with the lowest rates. Plus, the shift toward renewable energy sources is often pointed to as the culprit behind our soaring costs. Many of us hold these views as gospel, but is there more to the story? The truth, as it often does, might just leave you scratching your head. But here's where it gets controversial, and this is the part most people miss, because the evidence suggests we're not as out of pocket as we think. Let's break it down step by step, starting with the basics. First off, are Australia's electricity prices truly higher than in most other countries? In a word, no. We're roughly in the middle of the global rankings, and even that slips a bit lower when you factor in our relatively robust incomes. According to the Australian Energy Council, AEC, the typical household electricity rate in Australia hovered at about 39 cents per kilowatt-hour, from 2023 to 2025. This figure puts us just a tad above the OECD average of 38 cents per kilowatt-hour, landing us at the 15th spot out of 38 countries for residential power costs. For beginners wondering what a kilowatt-hour means, think of it as the energy used by a 100-watt light bulb running for 10 hours. It's a standard unit for measuring electricity consumption. Yet, as AEC analyst Carol Tran points out in a recent report, lining up prices dollar for dollar across nations with wildly varying living standards can paint a skewed picture of true affordability. Imagine an Australian family paying 39 cents per kilowatt-hour versus a household in Spain, the Czech Republic, or Colombia doing the same. The impact on their wallets couldn't be more different due to differences in overall expenses like housing, food, and salaries. That's why Tran's analysis adjusts for cost of living, and the results are eye-opening. Instead of ranking 15th for most expensive electricity, Australia drops to 24th on this adjusted scale, comfortably below the OECD average. In simple terms, when accounting for how far our dollars stretch, our power prices are more reasonable than they first appear internationally. For a visual breakdown, check out this interactive chart from The Guardian illustrating power prices adjusted for cost of living. So, in terms of how affordable electricity is for the typical Aussie household compared to the world, we're actually faring pretty decently. But here's the kicker: has our standing on the global stage shifted over the years? There's been plenty of chatter about Australia squandering its edge in cheap energy compared to the rest of the planet, but is that the case? Let's revisit AEC data from 2016, which compared household electricity prices for 2014 using purchasing power exchange rates, similar to cost of living adjustments, though not identical. Back then, our residential rates positioned us just under the OECD average, ranking 21st out of 32 nations. Fast forward to now, and our position is strikingly comparable. Sure, our prices have climbed significantly over the past decade, but so have those in other countries. For instance, global events like the pandemic and supply chain disruptions have pushed up costs everywhere, meaning we're not the only ones grappling with higher bills. Of course, these comparisons aren't foolproof. Cross-country electricity price data can be tricky due to factors like varying tax structures, subsidies, and grid setups. But looking at wholesale prices from the International Energy Agency, IEA, since 2018 reinforces this middling trend for larger economies. Wholesale rates reflect the core cost of generating power and make up roughly 31% to 45% of what residential customers pay under default offers. The rest breaks down to network costs at 33% to 48%, retail margins at 11% to 16%, and environmental fees at 3% to 4%. Now, onto a question that's probably closer to home: by how much have electricity bills actually risen in recent years? We all feel the pinch, but it's muddled by regional differences and those taxpayer-funded rebates, especially in the last couple of years amid global turmoil like Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Focusing on the East Coast, where most Aussies live, the Australian Energy Regulator sets a default market offer, DMO, cap in Queensland, NSW, and South Australia, while Victoria has its own. This DMO represents the highest price retailers can charge households and small businesses, framed as an average yearly bill, not your exact rate, but a useful benchmark. Over the last 3 years, the DMO has jumped 30% to 32% in Queensland and NSW, 25% in South Australia, and a milder 19% in Victoria. Yet, surprisingly, many East Coast Australians are actually forking out less on power now than they were 3 years ago, thanks largely to subsidies. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission's ACCC half-yearly reports on the national electricity market provide concrete numbers. In NSW and South Australia, the median quarterly household bill hit around $330 in September 2024, that's 5% to 7% down from 3 years prior. Queenslanders in the southeast corner saw their quarterly bill plummet from $230 to even a $100 credit, while Victorians experienced a 17% drop to $256. See this Guardian interactive graph tracking rebates impact from 2019 to 2025. Without those subsidies, though, the reality bites, bills would have surged 19% to 22% in NSW and South Australia, 14% in Victoria, and a whopping 66% in southeast Queensland over the same stretch. The Australian Bureau of Statistics Consumer Price Index tells a similar tale, with electricity costs up 19% nationally over 3 years against a 12% CPI rise. Strip away subsidies, and that's nearly 35% higher. So, what's driving these hikes? Johanna Boyer, lead analyst for Australian electricity at the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, pinpoints the main culprits: escalating wholesale prices, tied to generation costs, and network expenses, like maintaining transmission lines and poles. But here's where things get divisive, and this is the controversial twist many overlook: renewables aren't the bad guys in this saga. In fact, Boyer insists they're not to blame for inflated bills. Over the long term, rising coal prices have played a role, but on the wholesale front, gas prices are the real heavyweight. Griffith University research uncovered an almost perfect link between gas costs and electricity prices in the East Coast market up to 2021. More recently, unplanned shutdowns at coal plants have driven up wholesale rates. During sunny days, spot market prices can dip to zero, but as evening hits and demand spikes, they soar to match the priciest fuel, gas. Cutting our dependence on gas is crucial for lower costs, and Boyer advocates ramping up renewables and boosting energy efficiency, particularly for homes. Switching to rooftop solar with storage and using efficient electric appliances could slash your bills by 80% to 90%, she notes, providing a tangible example of how a family might save hundreds annually by investing in these technologies. Of course, retail prices encompass more than just generation. Network upgrades for a greener grid, think batteries and new transmission lines, are costing more and taking longer than anticipated. As Grattan Institute energy expert Tony Wood explains, while renewable generation is inexpensive, we've undervalued the expenses of distributing that power reliably. Cheap green energy is countering some of these build-out costs, but many are still waiting for the promised drop in bills. The simple answer is, not yet, Wood concludes. For a deeper dive, explore this Guardian chart on electricity and gas price shifts over 3, 5, and 10 years. In wrapping this up, we've challenged the notion that Australia is uniquely burdened by high electricity costs, showing instead that we're middling globally and that renewables could be part of the solution, not the problem. But is this interpretation too rosy? Should we be more critical of how subsidies mask underlying issues, or do you believe the shift to renewables is worth the short-term pain for long-term gains? What do you think? Are there other factors I've missed that explain our energy woes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear agreements, disagreements, or fresh perspectives to keep the conversation going.